of Rotary. As we all know, Rotary started in Chicago as what was essentially a social club, providing companionship, enjoyment and some other advantages to its members. Indeed, it was openly acknowledged at the beginning of that club that members were expected to give their business patronage to other members whenever it was possible. However, from the beginning, possibly largely because of the personal qualities of the founder, it had a clear and uniting focus upon standards and service to the community. The expansion from single club to world movement has inevitably seen great changes. Nonetheless, some of the characterising features of modern Rotary can, to a greater or less extent, be accurately seen as reflecting that early profile. Thus, modern Rotary can be contrasted with some other great humanitarian organisations, such as CARE, with which I've been closely associated, which rely not so much on the activities of any actual members as upon the work of dedicated employees who are paid with funds supplied by government or raised from public appeals. In contrast, the work of Rotary has essentially been soundly based upon the work, the generosity and the enthusiasm of the members, the Rotarians themselves, while the scope and extent of Rotary's altruistic humanitarian work has expanded to the extent where, for many, including myself, it is the essential characterising feature of today's Rotary movement. The organisation must remain attractive to its present and potential members, for without Rotary, or without Rotarians, there would simply be no Rotary. Last year marked the 60th anniversary of the death of Paul Harris. I was never privileged to meet him, but over the past 55 years, I've had close association with a very large number of the leaders of Rotary in Australia, many of whom had met Paul Harris. The great Angus Mitchell, the first Australian president of Rotary International, Douglas Stewart and Ollie Oberg, who were first early Australian first vice presidents of Rotary International, Sir George Proud, Sir Frank McDowell and Professor Alec Mitchell, are but some Rotary friends and mentors who come readily to my mind. All of those leaders of Australian Rotary mirrored the qualities of Paul Harris. Let me take a moment to identify what I personally see as the most important of those qualities. For as much as anything else, they colour the picture of Rotary as I've known it. From the accounts of those who knew Paul Harris, and from what he wrote and did, a number of nouns or phrases are clearly appropriate to be linked with his name. The first two have obviously been at the very heart of Rotary from the earliest days. They are companionship and service. One cannot know the history of the development of Rotary International and its achievements without recognising a third, namely vision. To them, I would add two others: realistic determination and humour. Insofar as realistic or down-to-earth determination is concerned, it's unnecessary to do more than to remind you of the delightful story of the first major project of the Chicago Rotary Club. It was the establishment of public toilets throughout the city. it's difficult to envisage any convincing basis for opposing public toilets. But it is a fact of life that those who seek to establish them surprisingly often seem to arouse strident opposition. The Chicago Club was no exception. Insofar as humour is concerned, examples abound. Let me safely here in Canberra, and to apologies with those from the north, do no more than refer to Paul Harris's own well-known account of his visit in Brisbane in 1935 to address an interclub luncheon. He wrote that the weather was hot and humid and he was feeling very poorly. He was sure that the Brisbane Rotarians had noted his sickly appearance and were concerned lest he might prove unequal to speaking at the meeting. They decided to do something to revive his drooping spirits and took him to visit a landmark of their city, Brisbane's wonderful new crematorium. Paul Harris's own hilarious account of that visit is set out in full in Alec Mitchell's History of the Sydney Club. No description of Paul Harris or of Rotary would be complete without a further noun. It's possibly the most important of all. Paul Harris himself certainly thought so, for he used it to identify the essence of the movement which he founded. Writing in the first number of the National Rotarian, published in January 1911, he said that if he were able to speak to every Rotarian in some enormous coliseum and allowed only one word to say to them, that word would be toleration, or as we would say, tolerance. In one sense, of course, the story of Rotary International corresponds with the modern history of tolerance and freedom throughout the world. Thus, Rotary, like tolerance and freedom, was suppressed and lost under fascism and restored in the enemy countries only after the Second World War had been fought and won. In another sense, Rotary International has represented almost a counterpoint to the history of outside events and attitudes. It has stood steadfast and true to principles and virtues that the world has sometimes seemed to be questioning and discarding. Where mere pragmatism and selfish materialism have seemed the norm, it has proclaimed its unqualified message of selfless service to the community and of tolerance. With an eye to the past, speaking to you who are concerned with the future, and at the risk of repetition, I should hasten to add that, as the personal qualities of Paul Harris and other leaders of Rotary would lead one to expect, Rotary's achievements and insistence on principle and service has never given rise to self-righteousness, self-importance, or undue seriousness. Generosity and service may be the hallmarks of Rotary, but genuine and light-hearted fellowship has been the adhesive which has held together the individual clubs, which in their totality